Hello, everyone. My name's Isaiah.
I'm Jane. I'm Sam.
We did a literature review on autism, specifically in young children. And so we examined three different articles. Jane.
I did gender differences and restricted and repetitive behaviors and interests in youth with autism.
I did is autism behavior, always communication.
And I did teaching play skills to young children with autism. And so pass it along to Jane.
So mine was a study that had 615 children ages 3 to 18, and it was 507 males and then only about 100 females. And they used cognitive assessments as well as adaptive assessments to compare. And they found that compared to girls, boys demonstrate more frequent behavior problems such as aggression, hyperactivity, and girls have more frequent nonverbal behaviors that may be a source of camouflaging. So a little bit more specific. So the behaviors that boys typically have are stereotype behaviors and preoccupation of movement of objects, whereas girls are characterized on like consistent routines and self-harm behavior, like pulling their hair, scratching their skin. And the study really went into like the next steps. This was the first kind of stab at like looking at this, and they know that there's decreased awareness of how ASD looks in young girls. So they want to continue that research, and then they want to figure out if these behaviors are different ASD subtypes. And yeah, that's about it.
In her article, she talks about how behavior can sometimes be demonstrated as communication, but is not always about communication. She says that people with autism sometimes need extra support with sensory motor or processing challenges in addition to communication. She also says that non-autistic and autistic people both have different forms of behavior besides communication. So like the two are not mutually exclusive. And then she says that behavior is not always a form of communication, but everyone can communicate. It's just a form of like finding the right one. I quoted, she says, have faith in your autistic loved one or client and proceed from there. Some key takeaways. There are times where autistic behaviors are specifically not communication. She talks about impulsivity, motor control, obsessive or compulsive behaviors, lack of body control. She gives the example that someone might think, an autistic person might think, I know you want me to go there and I'm trying to go over there, but I can't get my body to initiate that movement. And then she talks about stimming, that it's usually not about communication, but actually like a self-expression. She provided an example of autistic YouTubers that they were talking about. It's kind of like a manifestation of like pure joy. And then she kind of talks about like what to do and like how to react in like a scenario where like someone might be having an autistic meltdown or shutdowns. It's usually not about the other people unless like it's like directly triggered by someone. But she says that they happen when an autistic person is overwhelmed and needs to reestablish an equilibrium. She also says that sometimes communication isn't the only option. When it comes to that, sometimes as a bystander, it might be best to just be patient and like wait it out. But then she mentions that like safety is important, so it's like important to make sure that everyone around is being safe while the meltdown or shutdown is happening. And then she says that, but it is important to like be careful because there are times when communication can be overlooked. So while behavior is not always communication, sometimes it is. So it's like important to kind of figure out what's best for that person. And then she just says it's important to give autistic people the tools that they need in order to communicate. And then she gives some support or like alternatives to communication.
So I'll just use this. Yeah. So the study that I reviewed had to do with the different ways to teach young children with autism how to play, because young children with autism often experience deficits in play skills, and it's a very crucial, it's really crucial factor in their development and important for their daily routine. And so the study The study itself looked into 26 other studies that were published from 1990 to 2011, and they regarded teaching play skills to young children with autism. And so the goal of this study was to identify effective instructional strategies for teaching play skills. And so combined interventions were used in most studies, which means that a combination of teaching techniques were used. Children with autism improved their play skills, while direct intervention added their interest during play. Improvements in play skills increased positive social interactions and decreased inappropriate behavior. So next, I'm just going to talk about the different basically teaching techniques or interventions that were identified in this study. And so I'm just going to go through some of the ones that I found the most interesting. One of the ones that I found really interesting was the third one, pivotal response training. And so that consists of incorporating children's interest into discrete trials in natural environments, following the child's lead. So basically, an example of that would basically, you allow the children to, or the child to pick their toy or pick one of their favorite activities to do, and you let them just do what they like, what they're interested in their natural environment, and the person observing follows the child's lead and goes about it from there. Another interesting one was the use of restricted interest. So that consisted of embedding restricted interest into games to increase appropriate social play. So an example of that would be like if a young child with autism is like really interested, for example, in geography, this teaching technique would consist of creating a game for the child that involves geography, so to make it fun. And I guess another one that was also interesting was integrated playgroup model. And so that one was peer mediated, which means that the children that are playing and interacting with each other are the ones that are actually leading the teaching. And so playing with toys or like board games and stuff served as the actual context to facilitate social interactions. And so within this technique, you basically you create different groups of children and you mix children with autism and I guess typically developing peers. And so the typically developing peers are the ones that are taught the games and stuff, and they're in charge of interacting and teaching the children with autism. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. And there's many more teaching techniques to teach children with autism how to play, because as I said before, playing is very important in a child's development. And yeah, that's all we got. I mean, the way I picked mine, well, we just decided on a random topic, just autism in young children. And I started with just on Google Scholar, autism in young children. And I was reading through different ones. And this one for me was the most interesting. And I also filtered by date because I wanted to do a recent one, because I noticed that a lot of articles on autism are pretty old. They're like early 2000s or even like late 90s. So I did filter by date to get a pretty recent one.
Yeah, I think that was really good. I think every section had something I wanted to comment on. I think the first one, the masking in girls, I think SP talked about it. Right? Like, it's kind of hard to detect and there's no research behind it. I think there's a bigger push for it, but that's always something that's interesting to me. Because it's like, are you masking? Is that you? Or like, I don't know. Just like, the second one, I like how you talked about communication, and that's actually our next mini lecture, right? Like different forms of communication. And I think it's really important to like differentiate needs versus like opinions and just basic expression. I like that one. And the third one, I actually did not know how important like playing is for kids. I guess like I took it for granted when I was a kid and just like playing, but now
Thank you.
Should we do